All right, so in today's lesson, we are going to learn how to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. Now, completing the square is for an expression that's in the form x squared plus bx, and we do that by adding the constant c. We pick a number for c, so that x squared plus bx plus c is a perfect square trinomial. Now, this was way back in chapter 7, so quick refresher. A perfect square trinomial is numbers that are a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, so you can factor it so that it's the sum of the square roots of both a and b and then squared. All right, steps for completing the square. Step 1 is going to be to find half of b, and then we're going to square the result from step 1, and then we're going to add the result from step 2 to x squared plus bx. So we're going to use that result from step 2. That's our c that we add. You'll see this in example 1. So for example 1, we are just practicing completing the square. So I'll walk you through the thought process. Step 1, we find half of b. Half of 6 is 3. We take that answer and then we square it. So 3 squared is 9. And then 9 is our c. So when we rewrite that, we're going to say x squared plus 6x plus 9. That way, this is a perfect square trinomial. So now when we factor it, we can have x plus 3 squared. So the 3 went here, and the 9 went here. All right, I would encourage you to pause the notes now and see if you could do B or C on your own, or keep following along and pause it for C. All right, x squared minus 4x. We're going to take half of 4, which is 2, and then, actually that's negative 2. And then we're going to square it, which is still 4. So when I rewrite this, it's still going to be x squared minus 4x plus 4. But when I factor it now, it's going to be x minus 2 squared. So notice that minus 2 went here, and the 4 went here. All right, x squared minus 9x. We have half of negative 9, which is negative 4.5. And then we have negative 4.5 squared, which is 20.25. So now when I rewrite my equation, I'm going to say x squared minus 9x plus 20.25. So that when I factor it, I can have x minus 4.5 squared. All right, and that is how you complete the square. And now we're going to take what we just learned in example 1 and apply it to solving equations for example 2. So first step is going to be completing the square. I'm going to complete the square in the side here, just so I have room to write on the other side. So x squared minus 16x. B is negative 16, so I want half of negative 16, which is negative 8. And then I take negative 8 squared, which is 64. So 64 is my c term. So I'm going to add 64 to both sides. Let's see, I got x squared minus 16x plus 64. And when I add 64 to the other side, it becomes 49. So now I know that the stuff I have on the left is a perfect square trinomial, so I'm going to factor that to x minus 8 squared equal to 49. And now 49 is actually a perfect square, so I can take the square root of both of these numbers. And now I have x minus 8 equals the square root of 49, which is positive or negative 7. From here, I'm going to set up two equations. I have x minus 8 equals positive 7, and x minus 8 equals negative 7. So then, just like if I were solving for a variable, I add 8 to both sides, and I have x equals 15, and I have x equals 1. Those are my two solutions for part A. Part B, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to complete the square over on the side here so that I have room to write. So my B term is 18. I have 1/2 of 18 is 9, and 9 squared is 81. So I want to make this side x squared plus 18x plus 81. Now to get from -7 to 81, I had to add 88. So I'm putting 88 over here. And now I know that x squared plus 18x plus 81 is a perfect square trinomial, so I can write the next step, x plus 9 squared equals 88. Then to undo that exponent, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I have x plus 9 equals the square root of 88, which is positive or negative 9.4. I need a little more room to write here, so we're going to put one equation here and the other equation here. I have x plus 9 equals negative 9.4, and I have x plus 9 equals positive 9.4. And then I subtract 9 from both sides, so on the first one I have x equals negative 18.4, and on the second one I have x equals 0.4. And those are my two solutions for part B. Now C is a little bit different because I can't factor it with a perfect square trinomial because there's a leading coefficient. But I do notice that all of the terms are divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide the entire equation by 2. So 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. 20x divided by 2 is 10x. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And 0 divided by 2 is 0. Alright, now I can complete the square. So half of 10 is 5. And 5 squared is 25. So now I want to make sure that this side says x squared plus 10x plus 25 to get from negative 4 to 25. I had to add 29. So we're going to add 29 to the other side. Make that equal to 29. Alright, and then this is a perfect square trinomial, so I can factor x squared plus 10x plus 25 to be x plus 5 squared equals 29. I want to undo that exponent, so I have x plus 5 equals the square root of 29, and the square root of 29 is equal to positive or negative 5.4. So now I need a little more room to write again. I'm going to write this over here. I have x plus 5 is equal to negative 5.4. And x plus 5 is equal to positive 5.4. Alright, subtract 5 from both sides. I have x equals negative 10.4. And x equals 0.4. Alright, those are my two solutions for x. Last example, we have example D, 3m squared plus 36m equals negative 24. Again, I can't factor it right away because it has a leading coefficient. So I do notice that every single term is divisible by 3. So we're going to divide every single term by 3. So 3m squared divided by 3 is m squared. 36m divided by 3 is 12m. And that's going to be equal to negative 24 divided by 3, which is negative 8. Alright, now we do our complete the square method. Half of 12 is 6. 6 squared is 36. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. M squared plus 12m plus 36 equals negative 8 plus 36 is going to be 28. Alright, now I can factor the left side because it is a perfect square trinomial. it is equal to m plus 6 squared. Now to find what m is, I have to get rid of that exponent, so I'm going to find the square root of both sides, which means I'm left with m plus 6 over here. And the square root of 28 is positive or negative 5.3. I'm going to set this up into two equations. M plus 6 equals negative 5.3, and m plus 6 equals positive 5.3. Now I subtract 6 from both sides, and I have m equals negative 11.3, and m equals negative 1.3. And those are my two solutions for m. All right, some summary questions for you. What does it mean to complete the square? Well, we have to use a perfect square trinomial, which remember are in the form a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So we're using that to factor ax squared plus bx so that we add our own c, and then we're using square roots to figure out what x is. And how do you determine the value that's needed for c? We're going to take half of b, and then we're going to square it. That's what our c is. All right, why is it important to remember to add c to both sides of the equation? Well, otherwise it's going to be wrong. You have to balance the equation. That was something we learned way back in chapter 1. To balance an equation, you have to add the same thing to both sides, or it's not equal anymore. And how do you factor the quadratic equation once you completed the square? Well, you factor it using this, the perfect square trinomial theory, and knowing that that is equal to a plus b squared.